Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you're watching this morning of, these watches are all in stock and for sale. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning any of these watches. We're starting off big. Well, I would say more like standard. The Seamaster came out in 1948. It was initially not an aggressive dive watch, but a highly water-resistant all-arounder, a timepiece that could be considered the standard for Omega watches going forward. And so this 22 edition, it is a 2022 boutique exclusive. This is the boutique edition Seamaster. It has a lovely smoked burgundy dial that is cambered with a bubble-like sapphire designed to evoke those mid-20th century initial Seamasters that were water-resistant but not hardcore sports watches. So the grace here is inherent and borrowed from a bygone era. You could see the slope of the dial, the smoked fade from light to dark, the applied faceted indices and polished leaf hands, a case that is 39.5 millimeters in steel and only about 44 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip. The watch is 12 millimeters thick, making it one of the thinnest current generation Omegas. On my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, it wears beautifully. Not too big, and in fact even smaller than it looks because I'm pulling this unbroken in strap pretty tight. I'm shrinking my wrist, which makes the watch look larger. Trust me, even a lady with a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference will be able to wear this once the strap breaks in. Now on the back, it's got the same movement as the Diver 300 meter, which means automatic 55-hour power reserve, coaxial master chronometer, stop seconds, quick set date. You've got the tri-level coaxial escape and a full balance bridge and a free sprung balance. Now we have these little icons of Omega. So we're sort of tracing everything Omega is known for. You could see involvement in motion pictures. You can see that we have the observatory from the original constellation. It's also on the back of today's Globemaster. You can see athletes and the split-second pocket watch, the Olympic Games that Omega timed from 1932 on. You could see the factory. You can see the Omega Chronos logo, which you can find on a lot of modern Omega watches as well as vintage ones. You have the coaxial escapement. You have swimming and scuba diving with Jacques Mayol, as well as the extended Seamaster professional line. We have sailing in America's Cup. We have the hippocampus, the symbol of the Seamasters. We have golf, and we have a combination of the footprint on the moon, the lunar lander, and then a man spacewalking. So the story of Omega inside your boutique edition Seamaster. A really cool piece and one you can get into without mortgaging the farm. Now let's say you want something that is comparably appealing in terms of price point, but a little bit more expensive perhaps, but a lot more deluxe and a lot more durable. Well, for the 25th anniversary of the classic EZM 1, Sinn, Frankfurt, Germany, launched the EZM 1.1S for Schwarz. This is a watch that is black, all black, hard black, DLC, over 2,000 Vickers on tegmented steel beneath that is over 1,200 Vickers. This is going to be one of the most durable, scratch-resistant watches you have ever encountered. 43 millimeters in diameter. It features a mission timer style bezel that's bidirectional, and it has a countdown function, whereas the chronograph, which is a 7750 re-engineered to work like the old watch's La Magna, it has center register minutes, center register seconds. This is called the SZ01 movement, and like a 7750, it's automatic 42-hour power reserve with cam and oscillating pinion, but it has a 60-minute central chronograph register and instantaneous jumping minutes, which is a nice feature. So instead of having a 30-minute register, we now have 60 radially arrayed, and there's a ton of lume. And by that, I mean a ton of lume. No shortage whatsoever, including the chronograph hands. 200 meters water-resistant screw-down crown. The inside of the case is actually filled with nitrogen. I know, it says AR. Once upon a time, this system used argon. Today, the case gets a nitrogen fill to flush out any dust or moisture that may have intruded, and then the copper sulfate capsule is screwed in. So any moisture that remains and any that might seep in during the regular use of the watch will be absorbed by this capsule. Now, when it turns dark blue, it's time to replace, and that can easily be done during service. The watch has the sharp, angular, distinctive lefty profile of the original EZM 1.1, which was defined both by the form of its lugs and by the left-hand orientation of its crown and pushers. So yes, this pusher right here does start and stop the watch. It has a full bracelet, more on that in a moment. Let's take a look at it on the wrist first. The idea here with the lefty crown is that this was for the German Federal Customs Enforcement Unit. So they would be holding their rifles like this underneath the stock of the rifle. You would have your hand prone, and so the crown would dig in. And of course, generally, you would have your flashlight and your rifle together like this. So by moving the crown, they avoid gouging the hand of the agent who's holding the weapon. And that's why that is a lefty the way it is. Although lefties and righties, provided you're not using this with weapons, this is an ambidextrous watch. The bracelet is also tegmented in hard black, and you can see Sinn uses hex screws rather than flatheads because they can take more torque without stripping. And although it's not a dive watch, it does feature a fold-out dive extension for use over any kind of clothing above or below the waves that may require the watch to be worn over a sleeve. A really cool piece. You can see on the back, EZM 1.1, one of the coolest watches Sinn has ever made and full of its proprietary technologies. This was a limited edition of 500, comes with 2 accessory straps, one in rubber, one in leather, plus tools to swap between them. So it is a loaded set. The opposite of that watch is this watch. From Grand Seiko, launched in 2020 for the 60th anniversary of the brand. This is the SBGW 264. So you can see manual wind, beautiful 9S64 72-hour power reserve, manufacturer movement, a 120-piece limited edition Zaratsu tin plate manually polished case with a bubble-like sapphire designed to evoke a vintage plexiglass. The dial is designed to evoke birch trees, and we know how the Nagano Prefecture Shinshu Watch Studio does its birch dials. Well, this is how the one in Shizuku-ishi, Morioka, does a birch dial. Because remember, Morioka is where the mechanical watches are made within the Seiko Empire. We've got lovely dial furniture. You can see the hands have been satinated on their top, razor faceted and polished on their edge. The same true for all of the indices, which are works of art in their own right. Grand Seiko dials extensively handmade. They equal Rolex for quality in the mainstream luxury class, but whereas Rolex gets there with automation, Grand Seiko gets there with manual finishing and assembly of the parts. On the wrist, you can see this is a very flat watch, a flush watch, an easy watch to slip under a cuff. And being as narrow as it is, at only about 43.8 lug to lug, even a woman can wear this well. So this is one for him and for her, with a lovely forest green metallic dial that's really going to go the distance. In the era of green dials, we ask, which are the best? The best are the ones that are going to have lasting appeal, and this definitely does. If you want to spend more money for a green dial that'll go the distance, check this out. From Laurent Ferrier, this is a 10th anniversary limited edition of 20 pieces from 2020. So you were looking at the classic Micro-Rotor magnetic green. So we have a metallic sunburst green center, assurage or concentric pattern on the subdial, white gold hands and indices, a 40mm polished gallet or smoothed pebble style titanium case, a lovely suede strap with Alcantara on the underside, a movement that features a brushed satination rather than the typical Côte de Genève on these movements. And this is one of the finest finished movements you will find for under $100,000. It really is as good as it looks at first glance. Double direct impulse Breguet style natural escapement, an incredible technical achievement for watch you can buy used for around 32 grand. Micro-Rotor with a jeweled staff, and you can see mini ratchets, absolutely silent, unobtrusive, no vibration. The most undetectable, or I should say least detectable, winding system I've ever encountered. Bevels a mile wide. We're talking nearly Romain Gaultier level here, with sharp inward angles both on bridges and on the interior hollow of the steel balance cock, which is black polished on its top. Overcoil hairspring, a free-sprung architecture, 6-position adjustment, not the chronometer standard of 5, 6, uncompromising. 2 escape wheels, but no Swiss lever. There is no lever escapement. This is a direct impulse system, improving chronometry, reducing maintenance requirements, and extending power reserve, so a single small mainspring barrel can give you 3 days of power reserve. Being almost entirely sapphire and titanium, this watch wears easy, and the comfort of the strap with the Alcantara on the inside is undeniable. An absolute marvel and a watch I adore in every regard. It's proof positive that Laurent Ferrier really is the best kept secret in low volume indie watchmaking. That said, Arnold & Son technically doesn't qualify as an indie, Otherwise, it would be on that list. I put it on my list as best kept secrets, although technically Arnold and Son is owned by La Joux-Perret, which in turn is owned by Citizen Group of Japan. So you get a company that has often produced only hundreds of watches per year under the Arnold and Son brand, but you get big luxury group money and support to ensure that service, parts, tools, and knowledge are always available for these watches. Now, this watch is only about 8.7 millimeters thick. The tourbillon, flying tourbillon movement is only 2.97 millimeters thick, and the flying tourbillon is huge at over 14 millimeters. Taking a look, you could see that it is beautifully decorated and finely detailed, and it acts as the seconds hand for the dial, which is made of lovely white mother of pearl. Now, the watch is fairly large, but also very, very flat. So 42 millimeters, but look how short this is across the wrist. This is only about 45.5 millimeters lug to lug, and you can see that the lugs are welded on and hand finished. Very slow-going fabrication, so much so that there exist only 50 of these watches with the mother of pearl dial, the rose gold case, and then a movement, Arnold & Son 8200, 32 millimeters in diameter, properly filling this large case. You can see that the bridge on the underside of the tourbillon is freehand engraved. The bevels are mirrored and beautiful. We have Côte de Soleil, or sunburst, Côte de Genève, radiating out across the bridges. And you can see the use of solarization, double solarization, and dramatic double solarization on the crown wheel, the ratchet wheel, and the other barrel cap. There are two barrels to get the 90-hour power reserve. Note the presence of fire-blued screws. This is a truly gorgeous watch that, if it came from a house like, say, F.P. Journe, would cost deep in the six figures. The quality is there, the name recognition isn't, which is your advantage as an open-minded watch collector who doesn't necessarily jump at the hype names. You can see how thin this is. This was billed as the world's thinnest tourbillon movement when it debuted back in 2013, and really short across the wrist, so though a 42, the watch wears more like a round 40 millimeter watch. Very special. Why don't I grab another tourbillon, just for comparison's sake? Another flying tourbillon. This one launched in 2010 from the immortal IWC Portuguese line. It is the Portuguese tourbillon F.A. Jones with the signature of the company's 1868 American-born founder, F.A. Jones, on the dial, and a lovely free-sprung 4 Hz, 1 minute flying tourbillon. So a flying tourbillon has no upper bridge to block your view, so you get the visual benefit of the mechanism. You can see this is a classic Portuguese in rose gold, 43.1 millimeters in diameter, and it is a very red gold, as you can see, super intense, polished concave bezel, thin, slim case band, not too broad across the wrist at about 51 millimeters. And then on the back, you can see the movement features the 3/4 style plate, pivot jewels set in chaton. We have engine turning on the base plate, nice overlap right there, a ripple style Côte de Genève radiating out across the bridges as though the underside of the tourbillon were the imaginary point of origin. You can see we have crown wheel, we have a ratchet wheel with an extensible swan's neck secured click. You can see the click spring is a swan's neck, and then the click itself is extensible, just like an old pocket watch. The movement's broad, thin, and endows the model with a 54-hour manual wind power reserve. It's got a full clasp, throwing it on the wrist. You can see, though oversized, that's the look. Every Portuguese should be oversized. The original was back in 1939. It was built to fit a pocket watch movement. The idea was that a pocket watch movement was more accurate, so to create a wristwatch as accurate as a pocket watch for IWC's Portuguese market importers, you had to put a pocket watch movement in a wristwatch, and that's what we've got right here, as this movement is incredibly large at over 37 millimeters in diameter. It's also incredibly loud, as you can easily hear the tourbillon in a quiet room. So if you buy this watch, you might want to actually stuff it in the sock drawer overnight. Instead of putting a sock in it, put it in a sock. Now, back to Horlogerie from the Independents. So this watch right here is a limited edition, but it's a limited edition the way IWC does them. So 500 of these were made, whereas at Bethune, across all model lines and all variants, fewer than 400 watches are made annually. This was new for 2023. You're looking at the DB8. That is the letters D and B, Delta Bravo, and the word 8 spelled out, distinct from the 2003 DB8, which was Delta Bravo and the numeral 8. This is a revival of the original with considerable upgrades. Now, this is one for the old guard. If you love those old school DB1 style de Bethunes with solid dials, Breguet accents, regular fixed lug round cases, this is for you. Now, it's in grade 5 titanium, and you can see that the watch is super slim at only 10.7 millimeters thick, 42.4 millimeters in diameter, but only about 46 millimeters lug to lug. De Bethune makes its dials, cases, and movements in-house, so this thing has true pedigree. Some changes from the original DB8. Well, the original DB8 was sometimes called the football timer because it had a 45-minute register on its minute scale. This has a 60-minute scale for the chrono. You can see some of the original elements like the Arabic numerals, the leaf-style hands, and the rosette guilloche return. The note 1, 2, 3 different guilloche patterns. The dial is printed in blue for a nice warm blue contrast against the silver base. Turn it all over. We have a new movement. The original used a movement designed by de Bethune founder Denis Flageolet and F.P. Journe when they ran THA, which was a movement house that built movements for others. Now, they created the monopoussoir chronograph that went into the famous Cartier-Tortue monopoussoir from 1998. Well, Denis purchased the rights to use the movement in his original DB1 and DB8, so it was his movement, but designed with Journe at THA for clients. So in a sense, it wasn't an in-house caliber, though it was his idea. So the original had a solid case back. Now, a new movement, the DB3000, has been developed for this DB8. The DB3000 is now a 30-millimeter movement that is properly sized for this case, whereas the original was quite small and rectangular. This is large and round. This also has a longer power reserve. The original had 40. This has 60. Take a look at all that mirror-polished steel. All of those bridges have been black polished. Some companies give you some screws that are black polished or a regulator that's black polished. Nope, all of the bridges. And you could see that in addition to being polished, they've also been beveled, beautifully hand beveled. We have a full balance bridge to brace the balance against shock. Note the use of a very tiny column wheel, super subtle, and an ultra-fine lateral clutch that uses an oscillating pinion. Now, the monopusher and the oscillating pinion clutch and the column wheel are carried over from that original THA caliber. With the oscillating pinion, you get a super fine engagement that is as seamless as a vertical clutch while preserving the beauty of a traditional lateral clutch. And so that's exactly what you have right here. You can see how I start the chronograph with no untoward jump or stagger. Finally, the balance is Denis' own, patented in 2016, fired blue titanium wheel, white gold masses, 3 purposes. 1, maximize as much of the total mass in the rim as you can. Achieved. Minimize the effect of aerodynamic drag on timing. Achieved. And finally, reduce to the extent possible the effect of temperature change on the balance. Done. You can also see, if you look carefully, Denis' own silicone escape wheel to reduce friction, improve power reserve, and reduce maintenance requirements. And then a hairspring that is flat, cut, then shaped manually, micro-clamped back together, and it is the best of both worlds. Thin like a flat hairspring, shock-resistant like a flat hairspring, but breathing concentrically like an overcoil. Throw it on the wrist, super easy to wear. It's made entirely of titanium and sapphire, so it's super light. Fits under a cuff, 46 millimeters across the wrist. Anyone can wear this thing. By the way, the column wheel feel is really refined and exceptionally crisp. Finally, I usually end with a monster piece, usually some crazy complication from an independent brand, but today we're ending with a Portugueser. Yes, another one. And no, not the Flying Tourbillon. This, to IWC fans, is the one. This is the Jubilee. Now, between the 1939 debut of Reference 325, the first Portuguese, and the 1993 debut of this, the 5441 Jubilee, only around 600 Portuguesers were ever made, meaning the watch was well known as an icon of Schaffhausen, but very rarely ordered and delivered. This marked the return of the Portugueser as a regular offering. Some people ask Portuguese or Portugueser. It does not matter. In Schaffhausen, in northeastern Switzerland, they speak German. They say Portugueser. But it's universally marketed in English-speaking markets as the Portuguese, so either is right. Now, the watch is strictly faithful to the original. This in platinum, it is the 5441-06, I believe. This is the 06, and you can see that because it has individual numbering, it's very different from a modern limited edition IWC, which generally includes only notation to the effect of 1 of 250. This gives you individual numbering. Now, it's only 50.4 millimeters lug to lug, so it's actually short across the wrist. It uses a genuine vintage-style plexiglass, which gives it another vintage vibe, along with the vintage IWC International Watch Co. logo. Polished dimple-style minutes track, vertically arrayed Arabic numerals, small seconds, leaf-style hand, very, very faithful to the original reference 325. Turn it all over, and we have a rarely seen treat. Descended from the legendary ultra-thin pocket watch caliber 98. This is the 9828. This is a level of finishing you will not commonly see on IWCs. The first thing you'll note is that it's very different from later IWC manual wind large-scale calibers, because it has pocket watch style individual bridges for the crown wheel, the ratchet and the barrel, and then the center train, whereas a lot of the more recent IWC movements were simplified and cheapened, so the large pocket watch style movements you'll see today often feature a large three-quarter bridge and mechanical beveling, whereas here you have a lot of individual bridges in a much thinner manual wind movement, which is why this is also used on the minute repeater Portuguese. You can see that the bridges are truly hand-beveled and bright and polished, and that we have not one, but 3 interior bevels on bridges on a Portuguese. Golden chaton cups, reminding us that back in the old days, if you wanted to press a jewel into a bridge, you first made a precision gold cup, pressed the jewel into the cup, and then pressed the cup into the bridge. The stripes, the Côte de Genève, are beautiful, and we have here beautifully mirror-polished screws with the same treatment lavished on the swan's neck fine adjustment. Now this right here has a 56-hour power reserve manual wind. It has the world's largest hacking lever, which means, yes, it hacks. The balance is huge, almost the radius of the movement. Get really close to the wheels, and you can see that they have all been media blasted and internally beveled. We have solarization on the ratchet wheel, and then a sunburst graining on the barrel below that. You can also see engine turning on the base plate, and then beveling and satin finishing on the bridge for the escapement. Now, the overcoil means that this 5-position adjusted watch will keep excellent time in just about any position, and it has that lovely nostalgical 2.5 hertz beat rate, again, like a pocket watch. Throw this watch on the wrist, and though it's rated as a 42, it is quite compact, wearing easily and comfortably. Oversized is the look with a Portuguese. It shouldn't look like a 32 millimeter Patek Philippe 96. They have the same aesthetic, and they draw from the same form follows function 1930s design philosophy, but with the Portuguese originally designed to contain a pocket watch movement, and the 96 designed for a dress watch movement, a wristwatch movement. You can see why the Portuguese to this day remains larger, and that is part of the tradition. It's part of the appeal. If you love this marvel, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.